and welcome to the podcast series, A Burden for the Times, a conversation on culture and race. I'm your host, Adrian Burden, and I'm with my brothers, Aaron and Anton, to tackle some crucial topics in order to have some clarifying conversations about race. As we begin, we like to start off with, I guess we call it our light question of the day, get to know a little bit about us personally. So the silly question that we're going to ask is this. Aaron, if you had any character in a book or a movie or a TV show, it doesn't really matter, who is most similar to you, who would you choose? A little bit about your personality and how you see yourself, I guess. So who would you pick? Don't think about it too hard, but what do you think?
Okay, so just going with the first person who comes to my mind when I think of this question.
You're going to say T'Challa.
I'm not going to say T'Challa. I was trying to get away from Black Panther. And it's funny because we're talking about culture and race, and my person has no Black people even in their show, but it's going to be Andy Griffith. I do love some Andy Griffith. So I would like to believe that I'd be Andy Griffith. I mean, honestly, I'd probably be more like Carl Winslow, but I'm thinking Andy Griffith would be my guy. Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith. That's too funny. All right. Anton, character in a book or movie or TV show most similar to you, what would you say?
I'm going to say Spock. And for the nerd people out there, I would say
Star Trek, huh?
I'm definitely going Leonard Nimoy, not Zachary Quinto. But yeah.
Wow. Over that. Okay. I don't know the difference between the two actors that play both Spocks, but is that the one that's the older Spock or the newer Spock? The older Spock. Okay.
The real Spock.
Oh, the real. Excuse me. Excuse me. Well, I had a hard time choosing. I told you guys not to overthink it. And then when I said it to my wife, who I thought I was, she was like, no. And so I was like, well, now I'm self-conscious to say it. And so I said, well, who do you think I am most like? And so she called me Captain America. So you're looking at Captain America, folks, right here listening to. She said it because in the sense of, not because I'm an amazingly ripped human being that looks like I was like injected with some serum that was going to make me a super soldier, nothing like that, but because the idea of rally the troops, everybody, let's get going. Here's what we're going to. People roll their eyes because, here you go, take the moral high ground guy, you feel you're right. And so you're going to do this. And so anyway, so she kind of pinned me as Captain America, though. If I were to be asked as a child who a person thought I was, everybody thought I was Steve Urkel, because even that day is indulged in my mind, the day I first got glasses and I'm there at the eyeglass shop. And the first time I put my glasses on, can see clearly. And as I see clearly, this little kid points out, Mama, it's Steve Urkel. I remember that being over there. So that's how people see me, but I see myself as the Cap. I see myself there. But anyway, well, just a little bit. Oh, what? You have some follow-up, Aaron?
Then I'm going to picture myself as Stefan Urkel.
Yeah, that's one of the people that I was thinking I was reminding myself of, because I remember as a kid looking at, it was a Jaleel White, I think that's the name of the actor at the time. I'm like, man, he's smooth, man. That's all right. See, there's hope for Urkels in the world like me. So anyway, well, on to the depth of our discussion here. I'm sure this title is probably going to bring a lot of traffic, and not that I mind that traffic or attention, but it does get to a very sensitive and sometimes even political thing that we look inside of our world today, and that is the reality of police brutality. That is the title of this podcast. And as we go through, first, as we like to do in each discussion, is we always want to be on the same page. So we're going to start off with what is the definition of it. As we begin, though, I want to make sure we understand respect that we have for the police and the police department. In fact, as I remember as a young man growing up, at 16, that's when I believe the Lord kind of leading me the direction to preach and be a preacher. It was at camp that I was there and I surrendered to do that. However, if you had asked me before that, what was I going to do? My dream in my head was I wanted to be incredibly ripped and be a police officer. I thought that was going to be something that was going to be my future. I thought it was cool. I just really didn't know the direction. Everybody was talking about what their plans were and what they're going to college for, studying and stuff. And so it just, maybe because it just sounded good for whatever reason, but I kind of pursued that. And even during my crisis moment that I call it, during my junior year of college, when I was getting ready to change my major from evangelism and traveling and doing as far as preaching, when I had that moment, the first thing I began to think of and contemplate was criminal justice and continuing and thinking about the path of going down and being an officer. So therefore, with that background and things in mind, I remember the first time that I told a family member that I wanted to be a police officer, and hearing that kind of a little bit of a taken back that I would consider doing that with my life. So obviously we have respect, but understand that there are some stigmas that go with it. So first off, any nuances to this definition, Anton, is this. The definition is the unwarranted or excessive and often illegal use of force against civilians by the United States police officers. Anton, how do you view that, and how do you see it? And even give us any nuanced ways to how you're going to give us your opinion during this discussion.
I think that's a good definition. Only thing I would add is the things like harassment, intimidation, verbal abuse. So any form of mistreatment, it doesn't necessarily have to come to the level of criminal or physical abuse. That's the one thing I would add to that. Okay.
So basically, it's not necessarily being illegal what they're doing. It's just that's just not right. That's just not kind. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I understand when people say it's like you have to treat someone unkindly. So I'm saying like unnecessarily. For example, harassment. I'm going to follow this guy around and pull him over for no reason constantly. It's not necessarily to the level of criminal. It's definitely harassment, though. And it's definitely unnecessary and uncalled for.
Would you put that under police brutality still? Or is the word brutality, is that even a little bit more of a too heavy-handed to say that word? Or do you think it goes under that?
I put it under brutality because one thing leads to another. And basically the only reason I'm saying that is because that's how the police classifies it themselves. They do under the classification of police brutality. There are levels of harassment and levels of police brutality, although that would be the lesser value.
Okay, great. I think that's a fair assessment. Aaron.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to it other than I will say that I looked up brutality just to really get a definition real quick, and it was great cruelty is one of the definitions. And I think that Anton's addition to this would be helpful in the saying that anytime you use your power and authority for cruelty, and so undeserved, unjustified cruelty, I think that it can be. We'll probably get into this at some point, but I remember being pulled over as a teenager, and as being a teenager, multiple times getting pulled over, I was nervous. I was scared. Any power they used negatively impacted me a lot, because in that moment as a 17, 18-year-old kid by myself, and the police says or raises a voice at me, I am like, dude, I didn't do anything. I don't know what you're even talking about. And so I think brutality can go into those things just because it's an abuse of power.
Okay. Anton, before we continue on the definitions, I do want to follow up with something. And I guess this is a question for both of you, just from me. This isn't in the notes, but is it just me, or am I the one that's sensitive to the phrase a bad apple? You know what I'm saying? So like police brutality, as we continue our discussion, I know a lot of times people use the phrase, you got a couple bad apples in that. Now, before I give my opinion of thinking about that phrase, does that set well with you? Are you okay with that? Or do you think you're overthinking that if you take any offense to a phrase like that?
Oh, I can't stand that phrase, but if you want me to go into my first point, because that is it's very relevant to exactly where I was going to go based on who I thought our audience was. That yes, I do dislike that phrase greatly.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then for right now. Because Aaron, do you have any thoughts, or do you want to save that for the discussion?
I don't have any further thoughts other than I just really quickly before we even jump into this discussion want to echo the same thing you do, is that I have friends that are police officers and law enforcement officers, and I'm 100% behind law enforcement when they're doing what they're supposed to do. I want to call the police, and I want them to come to my house when I need help. And so I'm behind law enforcement. Do I believe there's some struggles and some issues that can be addressed? I do. So I just want that to be heard out of my own mouth also, so that nowhere in here have I spread. I have good friends who are law enforcement officers, and I am thankful for them, and I think they do a great job. So on that's the only thing I want to add before we start this conversation.
Okay, I can totally understand that you want to make sure you get that clarifying word out there of where you stand. And so as we continue, though, when we talk about police brutality, typically one of the things that we always do is statistics. I think those two words are married. As soon as you say police brutality, we're going to listen to statistics. Now, as we discuss and look at statistics, though, and this follow up to just the definition of police brutality, do you feel that statistics are just, that's it, that's the end all? Like, that's when you see a stat, I mean, shut up. That's the end of it. Are you of that opinion, or do you think that there's still a little bit of wiggle room with stats? Because as they say, the numbers don't lie, but in statistics, do you think as it pertains, because I really am hesitant to even give statistics about police brutality, blacks to whites, whites to blacks, but all that, because I believe it gets fuzzy and you can then start using statistics to prove whatever you want to prove on that given day. So is it just political for me to say that stats really don't give the full picture, or how do you see it, Aaron?
Yeah, I think statistics are great and they give us some good information. I do think when they're used outside of, I know that people, they're like, you have your emotional thinkers and then your facts thinkers or logical thinkers or whatnot. But I think statistics do help us see some things that could be problems, or maybe that it's not as big of a deal as we think it is. But either way, statistics are only a part of anything, right? So if I think I looked it up earlier just for fun, I looked up how many people, the odds of being struck by lightning, like as you have a 1 in 1,222,000 chance of getting struck by lightning, most likely. But I'm telling you, if a lightning storm comes, you can read me that statistic all day. I'm going in the house. Because it doesn't matter about statistics. But it's not just me, right? If I'm a youth pastor, so I go to soccer games, things outdoors all the time. As soon as the first lightning strike, it could be miles away. They shut it down. But I could get out in the middle of the field and be like, hey, stop being wusses, guys. You have a 1 in 1,222,000 chance of getting struck by lightning. Let's just keep playing ball or a church softball or whatever. It's great. The statistic helps me to know that, you know what, I probably won't be struck by lightning, but it still doesn't say, hey, I should go out in the middle of the field and hold up my umbrella so that I can see if that statistic is correct. So they do have value, but I don't think we should put all the weight in that, if that makes sense.
That is a great, I will add to that as well, especially you talk about that, there's only that 1 million, whatever chance. But if you know somebody who's been struck by lightning, I would say that statistic gets even less meaningful. When I was with Pastor Keith, who I worked with in Alabama for years as a church planner, I remember with him, he had been struck by lightning. And because he had been struck by lightning in the past, I don't care if we're in the middle of giving the invitation song for someone to hear the gospel. If it lightened, he's heading for the van. He'll drop the chicken leg if we're in a church picnic or whatever it be. And the thing is, because he was that way, it made me more aware that this guy, because he described his story of getting struck by lightning and flying away. He was golfing, I believe it was. And so the statistic, like you said, it makes it even more less meaningful when it comes to the place where, hey, I know somebody who was that actually happened to them. Anton, stats, any type of nuanced thinking about stats and how they play out?
I would disagree. A lot. I do not. I think stats. I think stats are incredibly, like, they do kind of tell the whole story. I think the issue with stats is that they can be cherry picked, which is completely true. But just like in a legal case, you're talking preponderance of evidence. When the stats become overwhelming, as is the case with something like police brutality or systemic racism, when they are just so overwhelming, you can't deny all of the stats. So I do think stats are evidence when, again, there's a preponderance of it, when there's enough that do not disagree or do not conflict, that you do have enough to actually prove the case. So, I mean, I get what Aaron's saying about the lightning, and I guess I'm being Spock here. You can't, I can't fight your emotional reaction to the lightning. I can't change. If you're really scared of lightning, I'm sorry, but that doesn't change the statistics or the likelihood. The likelihood remains the same because your fear is higher is really not relevant to anything. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. The fact didn't change. Your fear changed, and that's just you. That has nothing to do with the situation.
But the thing is, stats and how they relate to us, like, are we made for the stats or are the stats made for us? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you're bringing stats to me, to make me feel better, or what? Okay, so when you bring stats to me, they're not there. I guess your idea, Mr. Spock, would be that it doesn't matter how you feel. Stats, like, because sometimes people are looking at, when I say, when they give me the stats about black on black crime or whatever it be, it's then to emit an emotional response for me to nod in agreement and say, yeah, then I'm going to come off what I was just saying just moments ago about proving something. So what are the stats made for? Does that question make sense? I know I'm not being incredibly clear.
So what I would say is that, again, we brought this up many times, facts without context. Yes, if you are unlikely to be struck by lightning. However, if you're playing golf, the chance goes up exponentially. That's just a fact. So when you say, Anton, the stats of on black and black crime, I'm going to ask why in the situation, because I need context to the facts. So I don't think it's fair to sit around and be like, well, because all these situations are the same, I should say. Like Aaron talking about being in the middle of the field by yourself. Of course, we all know that would increase the likelihood. Or someone saying black on black crime is high. Well, why? What is the poverty level? Is there some other fact that would give this more context? I don't think the statistics can be ignored because of feelings. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, I can agree with that. I can get behind stats that can't be ignored because of feelings, but can we agree stats don't relay motive? Like, when you have a stat, you can't just say, you can't dictate how a person is to interpret what that stat is to say. You can say a stat to one person and they interpret one way, and then say a stat to another person, they see a different way. Is that fair, or is that being more emotional than logical?
No, that's fair. To me, that's cherry picking. When you take the only fact that agrees with your argument and ignore any other fact, that, again, that's anyone can do that and anything can be said. That's why I'm saying a preponderance of them. Once you have 15 from the most liberal source, the most conservative source, the black source, if everyone agrees, I mean that's the way that it probably is.
I can agree with that. I I'm just saying that it's just not the whole story, though. I'm just saying you can't just put stats down and tell the whole story.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I guess my hesitation then, and many times, is when I read stories, I was going through and looking at some of the stories that have taken place going back from 2014, and you're reading about Eric Garner and going through and seeing, obviously the higher profile cases like a Freddie Gray, Alton Sterling. You're going through Philando Castile, the traffic incident situation, Botham Jean, Stephon Clark. You're going through these names. And the only concern, the reason it seems like I might be hating on stats is because stats, some people can be more sympathetic to the stats than sympathetic to the soul. And so I just always want to make sure, I guess you see that, that Captain America inside of me, coming out these are people, even though these are stats, that's why I can't stand the phrase of one bad apple, is because if that one bad apple, quote unquote, raped you or hurt someone you loved, then you would find that you would take offense to, that's a bad apple. So you're gonna somehow take what my greatest tragedy was in my life and then demean it to just saying, it's a bad apple. It's just, it happens to most of us. I mean, some people get cancer. What can I say, man? She got cancer. I'm sorry. I mean, so that's what happens. It seems to be such a lackadaisical look at something that is very complex and in depth. But okay. I think that I think we're on somewhat understanding of where we at least all are in discussion of what exactly police brutality is and the statistics that surround it. So I think this is when we start getting into a little bit more of the brass tacks of it. So in this discussion, is it a police problem or just a cultural problem? Because obviously the entire podcast, we take issues that align with race and culture. So when we look at police brutality as it is in this big grand scheme, Anton, what do you think? Police problem or cultural?
I believe that it's a cultural problem that led to a police problem. And you brought up the term about one bad apple. There are two phrases, and before anyone has a reaction, let me give my disclaimer. I love law enforcement. I've worked with law enforcement. Most of my friends are in law enforcement. I have no problem with law enforcement. But what I'm going to say about the one bad apple, there are two phrases I can't stand. And we'll get into it. One bad apple, police are good people. To me, both these statements are ignorant statements. There is no basis for them. And the issue that I have with them is what I think the cultural problem that created a police problem. Because once you say one bad apple or police are good people, you create a good bad binary. Like, I mean, we all watch Marvel movies. The guy who's fighting Captain America, he says he's Captain America, is the bad guy. You don't have to do further investigation. You can walk in mid-movie and you can be fairly certain Captain America is always going to be the good guy. So whoever he is hitting deserves it. That is going to be your thought. It doesn't matter if the guy was sitting on his couch. You're not asking for backstory, which is fine in a movie. It doesn't work in real life.
Point. Such a great point.
And so when you tell kids, these people are good people, to me, it makes them adults who are incapable of seeing the good person do anything wrong. So they watch a video and justify anything that happens. Because Captain America can punch anyone he wants. And he should be able to. And if you don't understand that, you're crazy. Secondly, I think we do not hold, and this is a problem as a country, and I would say especially in conservatism, we do not hold good people accountable. There's a reason that some of the most corrupt things are clergy. We think of priests, police, politicians. When we give people a pass and say that they're good, we never hold them accountable, which is devastating as a society. And for the people out there who go, well, do you think police are bad people? No, I do not think police are bad people. I think police are people. And if you're a Christian, people are sinners. And if people are sinners, for people who are going to say, I think most people are good. If you believe most people were good, you wouldn't lock your door. Okay? You don't believe most people are good. You believe most people, if given the right opportunity and the right deterrence, will make the proper decision. And right now, you are not giving them proper deterrence. And so those two statements, always, if you want to just get on my nerves, those two statements. Because I believe once you call people good, for example, like when you think of why did white people think they were so much better than black people? It's because everyone told them they were. If you consistently tell a group of people they're good and better than everyone else, they will take that judgment and begin to abuse it, whether they are priests, police officers, or anything else. And we as a society have built them up into a perfection force that no matter what they do is justified. Again, I am not against police, and there are many great cops. But because you became a cop does not make you a bad person. I'm just going to add this last thing because I think it's something else that we have to be realistic about. If you are talking from the perspective of, this is a joke, just for the record, let's all put our KKK caps on. If you had an issue with people's race, there's not a better profession than to be an inner city cop. If you had a problem with Hispanic people, would you rather be a real estate agent or work for Border Patrol?
Wow.
Like, these are just obvious things that you can't tell me that's not obvious. And if we've had the Border Patrol agents who had the social media platforms, several of them got fired, where they were making fun of Hispanics. And the idea that is just, completely out of left field, I think you're being naive. Because, of course, if you were racist, let's stop pretending that wouldn't be a good gig for you. I think we believe that because everything that is a service just automatically means the people who would choose to be in that service would be good, again, I think is a naive position.
Wow. Well, drop the mic, young man. Drop the mic. I have no commentary upon that. Aaron, I'm just going to turn it to you. Is this a police problem? I don't know how you're going to follow that, because if you think it's something opposite, you got some work to do.
I don't think I'm going opposite. I think I'm going a different direction, but I don't know if I'm going opposite. I agree with what Anton's saying, and I think it's not. So before we end up looking like we're attacking police here, and I think Anton did a good job of making sure we did it. But the big thing is this happens in everything, right? I know pastors that have no accountability. Like, right, they can do whatever they want. You think you're good. Next thing you know, and I'm not even saying heinous wicked things, but all of a sudden, like, they don't do their job the way they should do their job. Like, they're getting paid to do things and they're not always doing the things they should be doing. So I understand what Anton's saying. When you give anybody accountability, I mean, with anybody no accountability, you stop holding them accountable for what they're doing, then that becomes an issue. And that's going to go into what I'm going to say. I guess I think the problem is, and I'm going to tag it from this one, I think it's police brutality is a pride issue. And I'm going to go, I'm going to quote Ben Watson for just a second here in the book that I've talked about a lot, Under Our Skin. But he's like, on the streets, it's pride that fuels the escalation of violence, whether it's the pride of the detained refusing to cooperate or the pride of the officer ignoring protocol enforcing submission. The problem of race in America is within us. It is not out there. It is inside here. And I'm going to say from a different perspective what Anton's saying. I think it is a cultural problem in that I think a lot of these issues are rooted in the sin of pride. And so a policeman takes the authority that he's been given and he takes it way over the top. This happened all the time when we were in college, right? I'll call them RAs or floor leaders or whatever you want to call the people in charge of your dorm in college. We all knew that there were certain people that when they got given power, like the pride kicked in, man. And if you like even blinked at them the wrong way, you're written up, they're making your life horrible. And it's like, what in the world, bro? You just got a pad of paper, get over it and like move on. And I was one, I was an RA. So, but like in my mind, it was never, I guess I never saw it as an opportunity for me to lord it over people or like tell people what to do. But I mean, we all be honest, there are people that, man, once they got that power, you would have thought that they were Adolf Hitler himself, man. This is what happens, and they're going to make sure everything happens the way they want it to happen. And I think that happens on both sides. And you guys hear me out, okay? So, and I want your feedback on this, right? We've talked about before culture, like honor cultures, where you cannot be dissed or disrespected. So you have to step it up because you can't let this happen in the Bible. I think we've talked about this in another episode with David and Nabal, right? David's been keeping Nabal's sheep and all those things are going on. And as Nabal laughs at David, when David sends his guys and says, hey, can you pay us? We've been watching sheep, taking care of you. We've been policing your area, securing you, keeping you safe. And Nabal's like, I'm not paying you nothing. He laughs at the servants and they go back and tell David. And in that culture, David can't be disrespected. There's nobody come to his rescue. And he goes overboard, but David's pride makes David head to Nabal's house to kill him. And man, why can't I think of her name right now? Nabal's wife. Abigail, yes. Abigail jumps on her donkey and rides out there.
Yeah.
Whoa, David, you are way better than this, David. Stop. And she addresses his pride. And David catches it. And so this is what happens in honored society. So whether you have, let's just say an inner city gang, it's a pride culture. I mean, it's an honor culture. Like, hey, you can't disrespect me. That's why looking at my girl can get me shot. But it's not just in black culture. It's in white culture. You start looking in Appalachians and you got the feuds, man, Hatfields and McCoys. And I'm just being silly there, but but you got real people who are mad about ridiculous things because it's an honor culture. And I'm going to ask this, and so I want you guys to think, do you not think at times police is an honor culture? So when you're standing there with your buddies and someone disrespects you, or like, what's his name, Chauvin, who put his neck on George Floyd and everybody's looking, and at some point, this thing switches off in your mind that, hey, I am the authority here, and no one's going to tell me how I can or cannot do my job. And so outside of me thinking now about doing my job properly, I'm trying to show that no one can disrespect this badge. No one can disrespect me. And so then we have this pride that wells up in us on every side of the human equation that causes people to lose their lives, to do dumb things, make horrible decisions, and even end lives. And so I guess that's my thought when I'm adding to what Anton says. And I think there's a moment here that is a cultural thing of, we have a bit of an honor culture in us. And when you have two honor cultures coming up against each other, I'm not saying the police are another gang, but I am saying the police have a close-knit group of people that can sometimes have an us versus them mentality. And in that law enforcement, their group, they can look at other groups and say that group's not disrespect me. Other groups will look at whether it be a gang or who says they're not going to disrespect me. And so then we have a problem of no one stopping and humbling themselves, because as Proverbs says, only by pride cometh contention. No one's stopping to listen and to try to fix a problem. We're just making sure we're not disrespected. Does that make sense?
I would call it an honor/collectivist culture, which might be one and the same, because it's that idea of, not like you said about the badge, because the badge represents you're more than just one. Like, how does the movie say it? Part of something that's more than just yourself, or however it's worded, basically giving the idea that, so therefore, if somebody says something against that which you represent, you must come in defense because of what it represents. So I think I can see your correlation between the honor society. Anton, do you disagree?
Oh no, I think we are an honor society. I do think, which this may be not the right thing to say, but I think police are gangs. I think.
Oh boy,
I think that comes immediately with a negative connotation, but I think, realistically, they do act very similarly. They have a very close knit group. They have their own defense and structural source. It's kind of. They are.
Okay, so before somebody would take that little snippet and run away with it, with about it being gang, so you're not putting it in a negative light, obviously, but do you see the same infrastructure? So could a gang be, in your mind, healthy? Your mind?
That's what I would disagree with. And that's why I say it's seen as negative. I think the only thing, I do not like gangs for the same reason I do not like monarchies, because bad people can run the gang. It's the problem with gangs, because really the only issue with gangs is that there's no structural way to change a gang from the outside. Is the problem. And that's why I would say police operate very similarly to one, because you really can't change them. They do not talk about each other or indict each other in any way. They're very loyal. They have all the traditional characteristics of a gang. And I think that, honestly, is part of the problem. Because if good men are in the gang is great. If bad men are in the gang is bad. It's hard to change a gang.
Aaron, did we go away from what your initial question was? I thought you were getting ready to interject.
No, that's what I was, because I was just going to add with Anton. I think you're right. I don't know if I consider, I guess maybe we just need to change the word gang, and then so if anybody tries to grab the snippet, they'll be okay. But we are us versus them kind of groups. And so I think anytime that happens, we find it easy to stereotype the other one and dehumanize the other person. And so that's where I think the cultural problem is. We've become, and it's not just police, it's not just black people, it's Democrats, Republicans, it's all. We found a way to dehumanize another group of people, stereotype them, and say they're all like such and such. That is why we can pull over a black kid because he looks like he's doing something. You guys know, growing up, we went to a Christian school, of course, and we had uniforms. So I lived pretty much my whole life in a pair of blue pants and a light blue shirt. Like, this is what we played basketball in. We did all. I can say that I can know that I don't believe we ever look like gangbangers. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen the gang that wears those kind of blues. And so when we start walking through life, I remember being stereotyped because I think that at times people are looking for a certain thing. It's an us versus them. So because I am an African-American 17-year-old kid, even though I'm wearing blue pants, probably up under my armpits, and my belt on, I'm listening to the most conservative Christian music with my windows down, loud as I can go. I'm still, because no one's looking at me as just I'm one of them. And so if I'm one of them, I have the right to be pulled over, ask crazy questions, pulled over for going too slow, pulled over for whatever random reason, or even I'm not going to tell you why I pulled you over. And the time Dad went to the police department because the guy wouldn't tell me even any reason why he pulled me over. He just asked me for all the stuff and did all the things that the police do, shine lights in the car and all that. And he never told me why he pulled me over. But it's because in us versus them, I can just do what I want because these people, I'm pretty sure he's doing something wrong. And so I guess that's what I'm saying. I think it's a pride issue underlying.
Okay. With that pride issue, so follow-up question. I know we have to move quickly, but I do want to ask this. Does power always corrupt people in your mind?
I think unaccountable power does. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I believe
unaccountable power.
You can see that. I believe you can see that once again. you start seeing, and I hate putting this out, but you think about Hillsong right now and Carl Wentz, Bill Hybels, even now Ravi Zacharias. Like, I'm not trying to knock these people. Okay, so this is a pastor talking about other pastors, saying like all man, but by the grace of God, right? But sometimes when we get power and we have no accountability, we do things that are wrong. Like, and we walk through it, and everybody, because there's no accountability, because there's nobody saying, hey, what are you doing? Or nobody's willing to step up and say something. Sometimes we go and do ridiculous, sinful things. And so I'm going to say the same thing with a policeman. Once, like Anton said, when everybody believes you're good and nobody's willing to call you out and say, you know what, that wasn't a good shoot. You know what, that wasn't the way you should have treated that kid. I think that when nobody's willing to call it, then I think that it is going to lose to corruption. It always does.
I think you find another biblical example of that with Paul. I mean, could you imagine walking up to the Apostle Paul and rebuking him, telling him that he should do something else in his life? And because, I mean, he could look at you and just look at his resume. I mean, well, when the Lord uses you to write nearly half the New Testament, buddy, you come and talk to me, you know? Because, I mean, you think about all of his accomplishments were pretty amazing, but you know what the Lord did? The Lord gave him a thorn in the flesh. And that passage says in 1 Corinthians, that passage was in so that you do not get exalted above measure. He's like, hey, look, so before you begin to think you're something that you ain't, before you start getting to some of the high planes, the Lord put something in Paul's life that it did not make him believe that he just wasn't more than what God created him to be. And so I do think that it can have that tendency, unaccountable power. Anton, how do you view that?
Oh, I completely agree with what Aaron said. Actually, there's a book called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, How We Lie to Everyone, Especially Ourselves. This is a pretty good book.
Yeah, by Daniel Riley.
Yeah. And one of the things he brings up is the percentages of people who would take money out of your wallet. The percentages is 13% of people who replied to that survey said that they would take money out of someone's wallet. He then asked the same question. If you saw someone drop $20 out of their wallet and they walked away, how many people would pick it up? And it jumps to 78. Because as I said, people are people. People are great as long as you put the restraints in place to keep their sin nature from overcoming them. If you don't, people are typically bad because we're all sinners. That's what people are. So, yeah.
Agreed.
So we have to continue the conversation because I do want to get to this because this is probably one of the crux of the entire thing is, do we believe then that police brutality is race related? Do we believe that this is actually that this correlation, is it blown up? Are we speaking in hyperbole to say that the targeted ones are blacks? Obviously, we're doing it on a podcast, speaking upon the topic on race and culture. So Aaron, do you think it's race related?
I do believe there's elements of police brutality that are race related. And I feel like, once again, I've read the statistics, seen the things going on, but I don't know what statistics would say or what statistics somebody can get to say it's not, because I know I had this conversation with friends before, even this year. Last year, quite a bit. But I still believe there's a lot of racial issues that come to this. I believe there's something to, we think of, what's his name? Let's go this way. Kyle Rittenhouse, right? Mm-hmm. Kyle Rittenhouse kills 2 people at the Black Lives Matter, and the man is deemed a hero. Like, he gets millions of dollars to bail him out. Like, he's taking selfies with the policemen. All kinds of stuff is happening with Kyle Rittenhouse. I'm even knowing my Christian friends who are like posting that this guy's a hero because he killed 2 people, he took the lives of 2 people. And when we start looking at it, I could be wrong here, so I'm willing to be. But I'm telling you, I don't know of any black kid taking selfies with an AR-15 that they're not supposed to have, and people are trying to bail them out of jail and say there's nothing wrong with it. Like, hey, he's just trying to protect blah, blah, blah. I don't know where that happens. So it feels as if in that situation and others that there is a racial backing to all this.
Okay, Aaron, then your life context is going to speak to you seeing your life that way. So have you personally had interactions with police officers that you felt would not have happened if you were a different color?
I do. I mean, when we lived in Florida, I remember out mowing my grass, and I'm out mowing my grass, sweat pouring down my face, push mowing in front of our. We lived in a mobile home when I was in college, so in front of our mobile home, and a policeman pulls right up into the yard. I mean, like right up into the yard. Car pulls in. He's like, "Hey, who are those folks over there?" I turn the lawnmower off, and I'm like, "Sir, who are those people over there?" Sir, I don't even know who those people are. They were just walking down the street. Oh, sure they were. Sure they were. Yeah. Who are they? Sir, I don't know who those people are. I don't know anything about, I literally have headphones on cutting my grass. Sir, I don't know. And then he like spun off, like peeled tires out of my yard. In the yard. Like he drove in the yard. I'm not talking he pulled in the driveway. He pulled in the yard and then pulled out. And I remember at first I was like, wow, that's weird. And I guess the longer I cut my grass, the more it made me mad. It's like, dude, I have sweat pouring down my face. I am literally cutting my yard. And you're going to accuse me of something and never apologize, never anything. Just call me a liar and pull out of my yard. So I did end up calling the Escambia County Police, but I didn't know his badge number or anything. And they, I'm not trying to thing here, but it didn't feel like they really cared. So we moved on. But it did make me upset. So, but that's just one of them. That's me as an adult. That's not even times been pulled over as a kid, as a teenager. Yeah. Like that's just one as an adult. Me cutting my grass was, I mean, nothing. Like I couldn't have been speeding, nothing. I'm just literally cutting the grass.
Yeah, I think even Dad came over the other day. Was talking about the time. I'm not sure if you and Anton remember that Dad had to push his moped back home because, yeah. Yeah, because he basically, for those viewers, we lived across the street from the church. So basically, you're going up to the front to the Kmart, and then you go across there's a big highway you cross, and then you get to the church. Dad decided to ride his moped over there to church, and it was Roundup Sunday. He was riding back home from church, and the police officer didn't believe that he lived in the neighborhood we lived in. And so therefore, he made Dad get off the moped, walk the moped, him driving with his lights on behind Dad as he's coming back to pull his moped back into the house. And it's one of those things where that's not illegal, but how mortifyingly embarrassing it is to walk through the neighborhood. You know, we were the only Black family in the neighborhood at the time with a police officer behind you walking in this moped. This is your home. You have every right to ride a moped do this time. Yeah, it's one of those things where, yes, it's not right. So it's kind of hard, I guess, for people to be like, well, see, y'all always looking through this lens. Well, if somebody were to then change those circumstances in our life, I do believe that you might see a different viewpoint for us of how those things interact. Now, Anton, I don't know the answer to this question, but for you, do you feel it's race related in your life? Would you say that those things have colored your glasses of how you view things?
Oh, yeah, I believe that it's race related. I go back to what I was saying earlier about the creating a binary. I think that another thing that has happened just because of the adversarial process that we have is that because of some legislative changes, whether you want to talk about, police involvement in the civil rights movement, or you want to talk about the war on drugs, created black people as an adversary to cops. And the second, again, you go to the good cops, whoever the cops are targeting become bad. And I think Black and Hispanic communities became bad for that primary reason, because they had been the adversary of cops. And no matter who the cops are chasing, they're going to be portrayed, at least in the media and popular opinion, as bad. And I don't think you can erase the history police have been racist. If you don't think they're racist now, that's a discussion that one could have. But the idea, we all know they have been racist. So you'd have to do something to genuinely change policing for it not to be racist. Otherwise, it would just continue to be. And as I was trying to point out earlier, when you have a job or a job that lends itself to racism or some other kind of social problem. There's no way to excuse the fact that to be a police officer or to want to be a police officer can have a racial tinge. Because of what you'll be doing, especially in inner cities. Like, again, if you want to go back to even the OJ trial, which we're not going to sit here and argue if OJ was guilty, but we can agree that Mark Furman, the policeman working on the case, who had said the N-word 1 million times, and is one of the reasons the case was dismissed, was clearly a racist. When people know he was beating suspects, things that everyone can agree are problematic. And yet, he's still an advisor on Fox News and several other channels. So you can't tell me that it's gone. we all know that these people still are holding high positions and haven't gone anywhere. You watch Just Mercy and you see that the sheriff just, he retired. He didn't quit. The crazy sheriff retired within 10 or 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And the people that literally kept voting him in. So the idea that, again, that's not that far from, we went to PCC. That's not that far from Pensacola. So that this is still a problem. So the idea that it went away, I think the burden of proof is on the people saying that it's gone, not on the people saying that what already was here hasn't gone away.
So I guess by all of us kind of putting our thoughts into this, I guess we pretty much say that it truly is race related. And I know that there might be some listeners who might have some different perspectives of life and how they begin to see it. I just say that, as we would respect an opinion that would come from you, I hope that you would expect the opinion from those as well, who have kind of not trying to talk about somebody else's stories or somebody else's life situations, but talking about our current life situation, that these things do matter. And some people are like, that these things that are taking place in our world does affect the way that we view it. And I do believe even things people say that, well, you were just kind of treated harshly. Somebody said something negative to you, and now you're going to blow it well out of proportion. The biblical principle that I'm going to, cite here is in the book of James about the tongue being a fire, is that with the tongue being so powerful, I can say something today that could make somebody so hurt that they will remember it for the rest of their life. And I can say something so kind to somebody today that they'll remember that statement for the rest of their life. You can go through your life, I'm sure, as listeners, and think about times inside where you have had a person say something that's been such a blessing that you can recall it to this day. And so I would say that even though seemingly it's not a big deal for some who looks at Aaron's situation, you're out mowing your lawn or whatever it be, and then speaking harshly or whatever it is, somebody to you, you understand that the biblical principle is that the tongue is a fire. You can cause great damage to a person. Like for us as brothers to remember that moped incident with Dad, that we can remember the things that happened with the altercations that we had. Those things do matter. And it just goes to speak on, which we'll get into the second part of this discussion in just a moment. It goes to speak on those with God has given authority and given power, that you have a greater responsibility in how it is that you use that authority and power God has given to you. Because now when you start making moves and shifts inside of your life and what you're doing, you're causing greater damage or causing greater good in the words you use during these times. So I would just say that as a word to those who might speak on and just might have a hard time believing that we would narrow it down and just in a couple of minutes and say that a lot of these are race related. But I think Anton, just to recap, the one great quote of police are people. That's number one. Then number two, I think we can all universally agree, whether we see the issue here or not, that that former police, going back through what's been going on in our world today, have been definitely, without question, it's been race related. And so if we can point to the revival of the police department in the 70s and 80s, then I think that we can still say that there's still a little bit something lingering that is there. So
can I add something to that real quick?
Go for it.
Yeah, all I want to say was can I just speak to the people who will say that these things aren't race related? You earlier said, Adrian, that we look through a lens, right? We all see the world through a certain lens. And I've had lots of conversations. In a lot of conversations, the first thing the other person will do sometimes is tell me it's not racist because this happened to me. And they explain a situation that in my mind is totally different, but it's still like, hey, see, I told you this is not racist. And I'll use this illustration for it. This happened a long time ago in our church, so this is not the way we are now. I believe we've grown. But I remember, applying this to the police. There was a girl who came to our Sunday school class. She was a black young lady, probably about 12 years old. She came by, I think somebody had dropped her off or somebody in our church had picked her up and brought her. I'm not sure even how she got to our church, but she was in my Sunday school class. And me and my wife talked to her. We were trying to, of course, be cordial, nice, because, of course, we go to a predominantly white church. So Between me and her and probably one other person, we're the only black people in the room in Sunday school class. And I remember talking to her. I told her everything is. We had breakfast that day. We had great conversation, and we walked into it. I had choir, so I ran the choir. And I remember staying in the choir loft, looking out at the auditorium because I was singing the choir. And that girl walked in through the back doors of the building by herself. She walked past every usher. She walked past because there was no seats in the back. And our church people, and once again, I'm giving them grace because I understand this was a long time ago. It was a couple of years ago. But she walked past church members and people just looked at her in the aisle. She walked all the way up to like the second or third row because there was not another seat and sat by herself. You could tell the girl had no idea what to do, where to go. And not one person stepped out in the aisle. Not one person said anything to her. She just walked in and sat down by herself. I was ready to come out of the choir myself and just like, excuse me, because I'm in the middle, and walk down the aisle and take her to a seat. And you know what? In my mind, I could say, you know what? Right now, I honestly do believe it was part of a racial issue. I do. I believe it was, she's not like one of us. She's not one of us. And we look at her more like, what is she doing walking down the aisle? Does she not know what to do? Instead of like, hey, whoa, you don't know? Oh, come sit by me. Come sit by me. We can call it what we want to. But in her mind, I would believe she, as a 12-year-old black young lady walking into an auditorium filled with white people, staring her down as she walked down the aisle, she can't see it any other way, I'd imagine, than as racism because the lens that she's looking through. And so I'm going to say the same thing. As a teenager, I've been pulled over a lot of times, right? As a 17-year-old kid, I remember telling with mom in the car, I remember saying, police are so stupid. And we did not live in a house where that was tolerated. So mom did not say, yeah, you're right. Mom rebuked me for doing it. But I'm telling you, in my 17-year-old mind, I could see it no other way. So when you look at somebody's situation and say, hey, that's not racism, it's this, but what's going on? I'm going to ask any of our listeners to stop and listen to the person and say, this is the lens they're looking through life with. You may be able to prove lots of things, and I'm not saying you can't tell them they're wrong or, you know what, that's not racism, but I'm just going to say, if you were to talk to a 12-year-old black girl who walked into our church or walked all the way down, I can tell you I don't think she saw anything but, wow, these white people don't care about me. I'm going to say,
Anton, okay.
No, I was just saying, as a 17-year-old black kid, that's what I would have said about the police because it did not feel that way. Go ahead.
Anton, you have an amazing ability, and I'm going to call this superpower, of being able to listen to a story and get past the emotion and still be able to take away a fact. So when Aaron tells you that about what's took place at his church and different things, when you view that and when you listen to that kind of story being, described, there are some people who would say that what we are doing right now is really aiding the problem. All you're doing, see, Aaron, you telling that story, you're putting it in people's heads. And so therefore, look, you're using that emotion to be able to then emit a response. And so, Anton, the reason I'm asking you is because sometimes you can see through that emotion, see and start putting factual things together in your opinion. And again, this is going to be mud on my face, I guess, as even asking the question in the beginning. But do you feel that we're aiding in the problem by talking about it at such length?
I don't think so. No, I think this is going to be somewhat of a longer response. I'm actually going to read a quote from James Baldwin because that's actually what everything made me think about. And again, I do not agree with everything James Baldwin has said or done, but I do think he loved black people and tried to help them. The quote that I will give is, I don't know what most white people in this country feel, he said, but I only conclude what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know we have a Christian church that is white and a Christian church that is black.
Wow.
I know, as Malcolm X once put it, the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means I can't afford to trust most white Christians, and I certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their union. I don't know whether the real estate lobby has anything against black people, but I know that real estate lobby is keeping me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks they give my children to read and the schools we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to take an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my sister, my children on some idealism you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen. And to me, that is exactly what that makes me feel. Wow. I cannot prove to you what if this is racist or not. I believe that it is. I'm sure you can make a coherent argument that it is not. However, the evidence, in my opinion, as I said earlier, is in your court, because we can all agree that it's been racist. It is on you to prove to me that it's not anymore. And right now, that's not what I've seen.
Thank you so much for joining us for this vital conversation. And we hope that you join us when we finish up this topic on the next episode of A Burden for the Times.